It's showtime, folks. Enjoy the show.
And a fine Saturday matinee to you, Steve.
Hey. Good morning.
You get them all.
I get all of Andy's lines today.
I love it. Poor Andy's down with a lame voice this morning.
Yeah, so I am the voice of Andy Nelson today.
The voice of Andy Nelson. I hope you bring horror trailers and that are set in a very hot place.
Let's talk about 2001, Pete.
Oh no.
No.
Oh no.
We won't dig that up.
This is you've already heard that episode.
Yes.
Patreon members, thank you everybody who's supporting the show on Patreon. We sure appreciate you, and we appreciate you so much that we gave you my opinion on 2001, which is going live in the show this coming week.
Wait, that's what they get. So they pay us money to get that?
To get that?
No, that was the most epic flick charting ever.
I don't quite know what to say about that, but I did. I'll tell you, in hindsight, I had a delightful time. It's probably one of my favorite flick chartings.
It's just, the fates just had their way with that one.
They sure did.
Oh, such a joy. Made that worth it. Yes.
I feel like, it was not long ago that someone, I think Nick, asked in the Discord what our biggest split had ever been. And we just hadn't had it yet. I don't think we've ever had a 1 and a 5-star split, between us. So the movie is important.
He conjured that up. He
conjured that up.
He called that down.
Thank goodness, it's his fault.
Yes. Okay. We'll blame Nick for that one.
That's
he asked
perfect.
about a big split, and you guys had to deliver that. Yes.
Yeah, that was fun. Let's talk about something better.
Okay. Hey, I do have something, and maybe you can help me with this, because I watched a movie this week, and I swear it was a trailer pick. I thought it may have been Andy's, or it may have been mine, but I tried to track down, going back through, if this was a trailer pick that was discussed on a Sat Mat, and it was a movie called The Endless. So it's from 2017, about two brothers returning to a cult that they fled from years ago, and they get a mysterious videotape in the mail, and they go back to revisit. They go back to the camp where the cult is, and there's just some amazing visuals of bird formations and circles, and just with some really interesting camera work. And I swear that in one episode, this movie was talked about. Do you recall?
I do. I feel like we have talked about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, it would have been probably in January, February or so.
Okay. Yeah,
but I do remember that you watched the movie. What'd you think?
Yeah, so I did. It really tore me up on this one, because it's a film that is right there in my wheelhouse. These are the types of movies I love. These small, independent, sort of getting into some genre, but because it's such a small film, they don't have a big budget for a lot of things, so they have to work within the restrictions. And the way this was shot worked really well. For me, they pushed a little too hard, too quickly into some genre territory that just sort of shook the world up a little bit too much, where I was buying into this, where there's some strange, mysterious things happening that aren't really explainable. Thought that's great. And then it just pushed into, okay, we're going this far with it. And I thought, okay, everyone has now accepted this new information and didn't really grapple with the fact that there's these mysterious things happening. They just accept it. And it's really, for me, a little out there from the world that had been established. So that knocked it down to 3 stars for me. It's a really great concept. It's Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. They co-direct this. They're the two leads in this. They do a great job with this. I just wish they'd toned it back. But I also learned that one of the little storylines that takes place within this is sort of a recreation of a film they did back in 2012. So now I'm interested in going back and looking at that film to see how it's sort of, we're very much in the same cinematic universe here. So I'm interested to see what they did with that film and how they sort of revisited it in this story. So
I haven't seen anything that he's done. Either Resolution, I think you're talking about Resolution here.
Yes.
Or Spring, he did in 2014. I've never seen any of those.
Yeah, no, this was, I'm enjoying my digital library service through Hoopla. So this was, I was just scrolling through to see what was new there, and it was right there for me. So I checked it out and really, really enjoyed it. Not as much as I hoped, but still, it's one I'm really glad I saw, because am now putting these two on my list of let's watch for what comes next from these two.
Well, I had a similar experience in our old family movie night movie last night. We watched Downsizing. Did you catch this one when it hit theaters?
I did not. This is the tiny Matt Damon, big bottle of vodka movie.
It is tiny Matt Damon, big bottle of vodka. Yeah, it's a whole. It's a movie that starts under the pretense that it's an environmental movie. These inventors discover a way to shrink people and hopefully, if everybody buys in and gets small, we'll save the environment, because we'll need a whole lot fewer resources to keep us all alive. And it's got some Truman Show. It's got some Walter Mitty. It's kind of a mashup of all of these things. The concept is really fun, and I think the first act is terrific, just in exploring how these characters, sort of decide that they're going to get small, and then we get to explore the small world with them, and the effects are fantastic. I mean, I think it actually, it achieves the look that it's going for really well. And the betrayal, and this was given away in the trailer, when, Kristen Wiig's character decides not to downsize with her husband, Matt Damon. It's a great kind of relationship betrayal and so they have this wonderful, super narcissistic phone call. And Alexander Payne, I think his vision I'm a fan of his movies. This one, man, it just comes off the rails and becomes so just ridiculously predictable, and so it lags in the middle, and then it's super predictable third act that makes it ultimately kind of disappointing. I did give it 3.5 stars, but it just made me sad, because I think it was a movie with a lot more potential than it ultimately gave us. I will say Christoph Waltz is, as always, funny as the goofy neighbor, and Hong Chow is amazing. She is the reason to see this movie. She plays a Vietnamese dissident and who loses her leg. She is made small against her will by the state, and so she tries to escape and is smuggled out in a full-size, a big person's TV box, and it is. She's just amazing. She's amazing. I could watch her in this role forever. That she's not only, she's an amputee, she's Vietnamese with a very strong Vietnamese accent, and she is the romantic lead of the movie. And I was just so proud of the movie for those choices, because I totally bought it. I absolutely believed their relationship, and I think it's proof that you can make some kind of against the grain choices, and there's room for that kind of representation. So there are elements in this that I'm just super happy with, but sad that it slowed down.
So this is in that category of it's better that I waited for this on renting this one rather than.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I think so.
All right.
There's probably some really interesting kind of depth of field tricks that you might really get some enjoyment out of on the big screen, just seeing the small with the big. They do a really nice job of that. And but yeah, I think this is a fine small screen viewing. This one, it is worth seeing for some of these performances, but it doesn't quite crest the 6-star IMDb rule, and that is, I think, appropriate.
Well, I guess what kept me away from it was, to me, it felt like one of these movies that has something, capital I important to say. And it reminded me a lot of Pleasantville, which I thought was an interesting concept, but then got into, the last part of the movie just had so many important issues it was trying to tackle and say that it really strayed from telling a good story because it was more focused on communicating this important message. And I guess that was one of my concerns with Downsizing was, yes, here's this high concept of let's make people small. But yes, when we get into the environmental thing, I was worried that was going to start taking over the thrust of the story rather than the characters in the relationship. But it sounds like you're saying that we do have sort of a nice relationship here to carry us through.
Well, I think we do. I think the challenge, as I sort of drill down into it, Matt Damon's character it's trying to carry the load of too many sort of emotional threads. And so, one is this, I want to do this thing because it's good for the environment. And then we get into this end of the world scenario and he makes some just really stupid, there's just a really stupid execution of a sequence where he has to make an all or nothing choice. And it's just silly. It's ridiculously predictable. My whole family is sitting there saying, and next he's going to, and we're just right every time. Like it just was not, it was not good. But I think it just couldn't figure out how to weave all of these threads together. The romantic, emotional thread, the inventor sorrow thread, the actual end of the world thread, and make a compelling sort of third act that felt kind of rewarding. And the end, everybody, as we're sitting around, is like, what was that? That was the worst ending ever. Like the movie stops. It just stops. And it took a lot of just sort of rationalization to figure out what they were getting at. I'm sure what they were thinking was those kinds of conversations. So, blech.
All right.
It just lost a half star, Steve.
And
you just helped me wrench half star.
And you just helped me. I don't know that I need to see this now. If I'm going to be that disappointed in the ending, I enjoyed the concept, but if I'm going to be if it's that predictable, if it's that disappointing at the end, then I've got other things to do with my time.
Yeah, I hear you. I have to admit, I was kind of hoping that this would have ended up a trailer pick to hear you and JJ talk about it. And even I am not. I love Sideways so much. Like, it's one of my very, very favorite movies. And Election is fantastic. And Descendants and Nebraska. I mean, come on. I am a straight up fan of Alexander Payne. And so that makes this, even more disappointing. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. There's nothing worse than having a filmmaker that you just really connect with their work. For me, it's Andrew Niccol. I think he did some great, like Gattaca. Love that. That was, again, that's small, sci-fi that doesn't have a lot of the trappings of typical sci-fi. You don't have all the special effects. And then, writing Truman Show. And then, you got Simone with Al Pacino, and just things have not come together really well for him. He actually, the latest thing he did is on Netflix with Clive Owen, which was an interesting idea that just is not executed that well, and it's playing with tropes that I think we've seen done better. And this one is called Anon, and this has to do with everybody's got these implants in their eyes and they can see, basically facial recognition, and you've got this sort of outsider group that wants their privacy, and it does a lot of things with hacking people's memories, and I've seen it done before, and I just very disappointed. It has some great moments, some good performances, but again, for me, Andrew Niccol is, I just keep hoping for him to return to, his strengths, and it just has not happened for him. So hopefully Alexander Payne with his next one can deliver something that puts him back in your good graces there.
Yeah, I hope so. I feels like, you look at Andrew Niccol just as an example, Gattaca, Truman Show, Sim 1, and then back to The Terminal as a writer, and Lord of War, which I thought was fantastic, and In Time, which I loved the conceit of In Time. I thought it was really, really great. And even if I wasn't a huge fan of the movie, then we've got The Host and Good Kill, and as you say, Anon, and I'm looking forward to a return to grace for him too.
Yeah.
I don't know. His next movie, Nickel, as I just clicking around here, is Monopoly, which you want to think is maybe a thing that's about, it's a story about big business and the poison of big business and capitalism, but it's actually about a boy from the game's modest Baltic Avenue on a quest to make a fortune.
Oh, gosh, no.
I don't know. So what are you going to do?
I don't know. We're going to talk trailers. That's what we're going to do. We're going to get out of here.
That's what we're going to do. I've got an A24.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. Yes. This movie we saw when I was in Phoenix last week. You and me and Andy went to see 8th Grade. And I don't know if you still feel this way, but, I walked out of the movie thinking this is so far. I mean, I can't right now off the top of my head think of a movie I've enjoyed more this year than 8th Grade. It is a fantastic film and just really, for me, just nails that experience as a father of, watching a daughter go through middle school and that whole experience. It's aged very well for me, and I can't wait to see it again when it opens even more broadly. So I thought I'm going to stick with this theme and go with
You're taking my thing. You're taking my thing, aren't you?
It's your thing, right? I'm going to stick with the Steve Sarmento Memorial theme. Thank God you're still here. I'm just calling it Memorial in jest. That is mid-90s, and it's a curiosity for me for a number of reasons. First of all, the trailer, the vibe of the trailer is darker than 8th Grade, and not just because of the sort of angst of going through that period, but also just because I think the story is portrayed as a darker story, the story of this boy growing up in Los Angeles in the 1990s, but also a curiosity. It is written and directed by Jonah Hill, and I'm very excited about that because I really like that guy's, his approach to performance, and I'm excited to see what he does behind the camera. That he has written it too, I hope is not putting a hat on a hat. But from the trailer, I ended up feeling really good about this film. It doesn't give me the same sort of vibe that I got about 8th Grade. It doesn't look as funny, but as the tag on the poster says, fall, get back up. I'm hoping this is a story about, trials and redemption and success. Ultimately for a little kid. Also, we've had so many stories that take place in the 80s. I'm kind of excited that we're moving on to the 90s.
Yeah, but yes. So
I mean, I just watched It and Stranger Things, and I didn't even talk about It. Yeah, not my kind of movie. Anyway, Stranger Things, all these movies that really, leverage the gestalt of the 80s, and I'm sick of it, man. I was there. I don't need it anymore.
Well, so you weren't there in the 90s? Where were you?
No, I was there in the 90s too, but the 90s were better for me.
The 90s were better for you. Yeah. So let's have a really dark adolescent movie. I know I was really surprised by this trailer because I'd heard that it was, Jonah Hill, and just so number one, the subject matter, it's not something you would expect from him. But again, I think, comedy and tragedy, sort of two sides of the same coin. An old man slips on a banana peel. It can be tragic or really funny depending on how you play it. But the other piece was just there's some grittiness to the way this is filmed. It really reminds me of the first thing that came to mind was going back to I think the early 90s, Kids. Speaking of a really dark look at growing up, the really, I guess, dangerous side. You've got here you've got kids like rollers or skateboarding like down the highway. Just a lot of really dark things going on. And as I said, you stole my trailer because this is, again, one of these, focusing on kids. And from Jonah Hill, it's not the light comic take of growing up like Superbad. This is the complete flip side of that. And those are the movies that I think are, if done really well, I really love, because it's taking those, conflicts and traumas of childhood and treating them, very seriously, which is, when you're that age, everything is like the end of the world. It's the way you feel. And I think this captures a lot of that really well. So I was surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised. But I should have known coming from A24 was going to be something that, is a really solid film.
It's got looks like some great performances. I'm actually really excited to see Catherine Waterston in it because her biggest stuff right now is Fantastic Beast and Alien Covenant, and I think she's I look forward to seeing her in a little bit more of a character piece, and because I haven't seen her in a whole lot. Again, weirdly, she was also in Inherent Vice, and she's been in a lot of stuff. I don't remember her for much because these big movies have kind of supplanted my memory of that. So I'm looking forward to her getting out of there.
So did you not see Steve Jobs?
Yeah, I was not a fan of Steve Jobs, and so I left that movie feeling not great about it, and so I don't remember many of the individual performances beyond Fassbender. A little bit of Wozniak kind of comes into my, Seth Rogen, but I was not a fan of that movie.
Okay, but yeah, but I think you're right. I think here's an actress that, has been in these genre films that could have been great, but fell short of that, and not something that's her fault in her performances. So I think something like this, to see a different side of her, something a little bit more down to earth, gritty, see what we get from her.
That's right. This one comes out October 19th, 2018. So it'll be a nice fall film. Back to the 90s, people.
Yeah. What?
What's yours?
That's funny because my trailer is also going back to the 90s in a way. And I stole your trailer. You stole mine. I steal yours right back at you. Because I'm doing Final Score, which is every single Bruce Willis and Jean-Claude Van Damme movie from the 90s, but with Dave Bautista in it. And I know you are a Bautista fan, and I know you love, like the Jack Reacher, books. And it to me, this is like, wow, this movie is custom made for Pete. It's got everything. You got Pierce Brosnan, Dave Bautista. This is, directed by Scott Mann, and he last directed a film in 2015 called Heist with Robert De Niro and Dave Bautista. So I guess he's got a good working relationship with Mr. Bautista there. Written by the brothers Lynch. I'm not as familiar with with their work, but I am thinking that what, we need to get this on the calendar for a future trailer rewind, you and me, to sit down and look at this one, because I'm very interested in what you think of this movie, and actually sitting through this. And does it
sitting through this? Do you hear how you sound? You're coming into it like such a negative Nelly.
Oh, it's every single cliche. I mean, yes. Now the effects are ramped up, and we've got it's a soccer stadium, and he's like driving a motorcycle across like the roof of the stadium, and I mean, there's some just great, fun things, but I know it's just the dialogue. I'm like, I've heard these lines before. They're trying to come back with, the Arnie one-liners, and it's been done to death. And so I think maybe there's a generation that never saw those movies, and this'll work really great for them. But for us, we've seen this done and done over and over again. And I'm not optimistic, but I'm willing to go and have fun with this. But I have a feeling it's going to be a groaner. Well,
I will gladly sit in as a guest on that particular trailer rewind. Very special edition. When's it come out?
Looks like probably September. We've got September 7th in the UK and Ireland. Maybe Mr. Smart can tell us how it works out there. Portugal, September 20th. Netherlands, September 27th. South Africa, January 4th. USA, sometime in 2018. So maybe this will be a straight to video, and we'll get to see it a little bit sooner than you think.
Man, I want the big screen rumble seats.
That is perfect for
this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. All right. Well, Steve, I think we have belabored this long enough. It's time for us to do the list.
Okay.
I have to say, last week we were talking about the list, and we had back to school movies and summer vacation movies, as opposed to any old vacation movies, specifically summer vacation movies. And our third choice was movies where it's really hot. And I think that was ended up sort of a joke on my part, but nobody else voted for any other option, and so we had to come up with the movies where it's really hot. And I thought this is going to be really hard. It turns out it wasn't actually all that hard.
Well, now we'll see. We'll see how similar our lists are, because I came across some interesting choices with this, and I was pleasantly surprised once I started thinking about this topic. It did give us some latitude. It wasn't, like heist movies on a train with, backpacks or something like that where I, have nothing to contribute. This I think, a really solid list. I'm anticipating you stealing 1, 2, maybe 3 of these. We'll see. I've got a couple backups here.
Excellent.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick off
go ahead. Steal it. Go ahead.
My A24 steal. Here we go. The first one that I have, it starts out with such a great idea. We're just going to take an afternoon and rob a bank to help a little operation, little snip. Unfortunately, there's no money in the bank, and we have to take some hostages. I'm talking, of course, about Dog Day Afternoon, 1975, Al Pacino, John Cazale, Penelope Allen. This is a movie where the temperature outside absolutely plays a role in driving toward the stakes that ultimately play out in the film. It's a story about media. It's a story about guns. It's a story about love, and it's just an all-around classic, fantastic, and is absolutely worth seeing. If you haven't seen it, I've run into more and more people who haven't seen this movie, especially in my own family, and it's very disappointing to me. So this is I'm kicking off my effort to show this movie to more people.
No, it's one I have not seen in quite a long time, but one that definitely should be on people's must-see list. This comes out of the gritty 70s, and Al Pacino, just so many great things about this film. It didn't make it out of my list because it had been a long time since I'd seen it, and I wanted to have something I could talk a little bit more in depth about, because I have just vague recollections of specific story points, those that you mentioned. But great pick. Definitely, if our listeners out there have not seen this, put it on your list. You will not be disappointed with Dog Day Afternoon.
So there you go. There's number one. Okay. I'm kicking it off with a hot afternoon hostage standoff. Where would you go from here?
I am going to July 1989, and a movie that I saw in a theater with a crowd that was very diverse. And it was one of the few times I felt that a movie stirred up an audience. After the credits were rolling, there was anger, there was fear, there was just a lot of emotions in that theater. And I think I had just finished my first year of college and just was like, I've never seen this reaction from a movie. I'm talking about Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. Movie very much about the heat of summer and how that just, fuels a lot of emotion in the people on the street there. This was the first Spike Lee movie I had seen. It's still, I think, one of my favorites of his. Just great performances all around, and a case, I think, going back to, as I talked about, Downsizing, a movie with something important to say that does manage to balance that with the characters. Just such a great, solid movie. The soundtrack is amazing. So many faces that for me were new at the time that have become, just very familiar. You've got Samuel Jackson in here, one of his early roles. Just do the right thing, Pete. Do the right thing.
This is a first steal in the first round. I also had this one on the list a little bit higher up. I totally agree with you. This is one that made quite an impact, not just on what the film was about, but with Spike Lee as a filmmaker. I really enjoyed this movie and was impacted by it. And man, temperature, hot afternoon in an Italian restaurant. My next pick, we're gonna go even further back in the 1950s.
Oh no.
Did I steal it? One from you?
I'm pretty sure you did. Well, we'll see. There's a couple that it could be, I think. Let's see.
Oh, LB. What are you doing? Just looking out that rear window. This is James Stewart and Grace Kelly. I don't know if I'm picking this more because it is obviously a hot day, and that impacts the nature of the narrative and what he sees and what he thinks he sees staring out of his rear window into his little square in Greenwich Village. But also, I had a mad crush on Grace Kelly, and so
how could you
I
not?
watched this movie a lot because of her, and I think I watched it just not even knowing what it was about for years before I actually tuned into the film. So, very big fan. This is another super duper classic Rear Window. Yeah, it's been attempted multiple times in different clothes, but the original is still absolutely the best. Rear Window, 1954.
Yeah, that's a big steal, because this was, gosh, when I saw this, I'd always thought of Hitchcock, as a teenager. Oh, Hitchcock, he's the guy that did that scary movie Psycho with, the creepy guy, and you've got the shower scene. And so Hitchcock had always been in my mind sort of like, oh, he did like horror movies,
Yeah.
So when I saw Rear Window, it just completely opened my eyes to his craft as a director and storyteller, of what he does with the camera. Just, to me, this is one of my all-time favorite films. And yeah, how do you not fall in love with Grace Kelly? Just a perfect movie. So thanks for stealing my top pick there, Pete.
You're welcome. Tip of the hat.
I got to dig into the depths
the
here.
bowels.
Yes. Okay. So when I thought of hot summers, I think of, flaring tempers and anger and how the heat just makes people uncomfortable. And so this is one I saw in the theater. I haven't seen it in a long time, but this is Michael Douglas in 1993's Falling Down, about a man with a temper and taking out his, anger and frustration on all the injustices and flaws he sees in society. It's not a perfect film. It's one that I think, as I was building this list, I thought this might be interesting to watch and go back and see what, how this represents the early 90s. And we have a lot of people that are angry today about a lot of things to see. Does this film still speak to today, or is it still very much of its era? But, this is Joel Schumacher, Michael Douglas, Robert Duvall, Falling Down from 1993.
I don't have a really strong memory of this, other than just sort of a sense memory of what it's about. I think I only saw it once, but I do remember the cast was fantastic, right? Barbara Hershey and Tuesday Weld with Duvall and Michael Douglas. I remember having a pretty good feeling about it, but I don't know why I wouldn't have seen it multiple times. Maybe just the wrong year.
Well, as I said, it's not a great film, and I think it's one that you say, oh yeah, I saw it, I don't need to see it again. But I think now several decades later, maybe worth revisiting. But that's my fill-in. Thanks to your steal.
All right, my next pick, I got a couple I could go with, and I really struggle because there's the cultural resonance of one of them. There's the one of my it sat at number one on my favorite films list for many years as another, and then it's just stupid comedy as another. And I was really torn with what to do with this last pick. I'm going to go with the favorite film pick, and that is Lawrence of Arabia.
Ah, yes.
There's something about this movie. It's long. It's 3 hours, maybe 3 hours and change. Yeah, it's 3.5 hours. It's super long. It is really hot. There are wonderful blazing sun silhouette shots. It just feels hot. The whole story of Lawrence, the English officer who unites the Arab tribes during World War I to fight the Turks. It's a big epic war story, but it's in a desert, and it's so, you just feel it. It is the heat of this place is exhausting before you even get into the portrayal of Peter O'Toole as T.E. Lawrence and Alec Guinness as Prince Faisal, Anthony Quinn, Jack Hawkins, Omar Sharif. It's just an amazing cast in a movie that's it's a true epic. And so it's hard to get people to sit down and watch this with me. I haven't seen it in a lot of years, and this show has had me shuffle up my personal favorites list a number of times in my top 10. But I have such a fond feeling toward this movie. It's brilliant from director David Lean. I love it. And so there you go. There's my final pick, Lawrence of Arabia. Hot, hot, hot.
So is this a movie that, like, on a hot summer day, you'll just have people over and just put it on the TV to have it on the background, and they'll look at this like, another shot of the sun over the desert? What is this movie?
I see what you're doing there, and I'm going to tell you, no, I would never do that to people.
Of course you wouldn't.
Do you hear that, Andy? I would never do that to people.
Because this is, 3.5 hours. And it is one that I probably should have seen more than I have, but it is tough to find time to sit down and really, engage in it. With this movie. It is a true epic. It's an amazing film. I can understand easily why this should be at the top of your list. Great pick. Great pick. So
all right, what's your final? That wasn't a steal, I assume.
No, that was not. Because again, it's been a while. But it, again, put it on my list to revisit, because I was probably in my 20s maybe when I saw that last.
Yeah.
Just one of those. I was working my way through the classics. And, so I said, I can't believe it was. I remember watching that and Sunset Boulevard and saying, why have I not watched these earlier? These are such great films.
Right.
But my final pick today, another just classic, to me, perfect film. This was back in the era when cinema was still really influenced by sort of the theatrical presentation. This was actually adapted from a teleplay. I'm talking about 12 Angry Men. Hot summer day, jury locked into a room, having to come to, unanimous decision. And here's, Mr. Fonda gonna just throw a wrench in the works and not let anybody out of there because he's got concerns. The cast, the writing, everything about this movie. When I saw this, I thought, wow, you don't make movies like this anymore. It's so well done, and it captures so many emotions. You've got the heat. I'm speechless because I don't know what else to say about this movie. I guess one of the most interesting things that I can say about this is, if you have not seen 12 Angry Men Inside Amy Schumer, it is spot on, perfect satire that honors the film in its writing and casting. It is amazing. It is taking 12 Angry Men and we're updating it. It's about whether or not the issue is whether or not Amy Schumer is hot enough to be on TV. But the cast, the casting on this was just perfect, because it's like you're watching 12 Angry Men. You're like, there's some physical resemblances to the original cast and just performances. If you have not seen it, search it out online. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. If you've seen 12 Angry Men, check out. I think it's about 20 minutes. So they take their time. It's not a little 3-minute sketch. They take their time with pacing to really deliver, I think, something that shows some great respect to the original.
Well, I would, 2 points. First, in line with you pitching other versions of 12 Angry Men, I can't let the 1997 version of 12 Angry Men, also based on the Rose teleplay, directed by William Friedkin. This one starring Jack Lemmon, George C. Scott, Hume Cronin. This is, it is not for me completely equal to the original. I'm much more of a fan of, Fonda and Lee J. Cobb, but it is exceptional. It was another TV movie, but you track it down and watch it if you're a fan of this stuff, because it's also just great. I mean, Tony Danza's in it, for crying out loud. James Gandolfini, McKelty Williamson, Edward James Olmos, William Peterson. It's a straight up great cast to modernize this a little bit. So if you're a fan of that. Also interesting that in our movie set, when it's really hot, we have 2 Sidney Lumet films.
Oh, yes.
Which it turns out Sidney Lumet actually corners the market of hot movies. Temperature's big for Sid.
Yes.
There you go. There's our pick. Now we didn't talk about what we're going to do for next week.
What is on the slate for the big show next week?
So that's going to be 2001.
Oh, so much fun. So we have to come up with topics related to 2001.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got the human versus computer. So that's always good. That's a good one. We talk about the Odyssey. You could talk about.
I was going to say movies that are adapted from the classics of ancient literature.
of ancient classics, because that's a really long list. Well, no, there's a few that could show up there. Okay,
I like that. I like human versus computer. We could do. Oh, here's an interesting one: messages from outer space. Movies where we get messages from outer space.
Okay. Yeah, that. Okay.
Great asphyxiation scenes.
No, I think adapted from ancient classics, human versus computer, and messages from outer space, because you've got sort of 3 very different things. Because I think the human versus computer is one type of conflict. Messages from outer space, we're dealing with a little bit more science fiction, whereas human versus computer can be a little bit more grounded in reality. Yeah. That opens up some.
I like that.
Some
I think
avenues.
we can come up with some good things.
Yeah,
we'll save the asphyxiation in outer space for later. Perfect. That's a good list for 2001. Okay. Andy will be so proud. I hope we make Andy proud. What are you going to go see this weekend? You got anything hot on your list?
Everybody's going to see the Impossible Mission Falling Out with the Tom Cruise.
I want to see Tom falling out. That's the truth.
I have just seen the one trailer, but I've seen the interviews about the broken ankle and all of that stuff, but I have no idea where they're going with the story. I've got what's been teased in the trailer, so I'm looking forward to having a really good time with this one. I like the direction they're going with this franchise, so I'm really excited about this I think fits everything of what you expect from a summer action film, and
in a series that just keeps getting better.
Oh, definitely.
An interesting thing about this one is that I read that we've seen so many of the behind the scenes type trailers. I'm calling them trailers because I think they're used specifically for promotion in this case, right? The Tom Cruise as stuntman types of trailers, and all of the major sequences he's out there. Paramount has just been blowing up their promotion with this. And what I understand is part of the reason they really want to get people in to see this thing, and they need to get people in to see this thing, is because he broke his ankle, which we've talked about exhaustively. They had to shut down production of this massive movie. It ends up being even more expensive, much more expensive than it would have been otherwise. And they're trying to really get people who otherwise wouldn't see the movie because it's just a dumb summer action movie. They're trying to get them in to see it for the sort of slow motion train wreck of stunts. To see the scene with the ankle break that made it into the movie. So I am curious about that strategy. Everything I've heard from reviewers I trust is that the movie is exceptional on its own merits, but that they're really trying to promote this thing to get a different kind of audience into the seat too. So we'll see if it works.
Yeah, that's my afternoon for
I got
today.
noon tickets here too.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, that's it. We'll talk about it next week. Big Show starts up again on Thursday. If you're a Patreon member, you probably already got it in your preview feed. Andy and I are recording really much earlier than we ever have. We used to record just a couple of days before we'd release it, and now we're doing it a couple of weeks early. So those who are patrons will get a nice, healthy preview rather than the sometimes 6 or 12 hour preview that I would finally get around to getting it done. It's a busy weeks are busy. So I'm excited about getting into a new routine and giving more extensive previews to folks. So thanks as ever for showing up and downloading and listening to this show. We appreciate you guys. Thank you very much. And Steve, thanks to you. I'll talk to you next week.
Hondo.